Hi, here we are again at this Purdue OWL writing lab. And I'm going to just kind of take you through the writing of the rough draft and the things that you really should keep in mind. First of all, you always are taken to this APA style. There is a seventh edition, which just came out this semester. The sixth edition you can still access, but know that it's old and it probably won't be accessible for a while. And so hopefully you've been using the seventh edition. And again, a very quick overview. I have been marking reference lists and putting comments on there all over the place. So hopefully you've been taking a look at those and fixing those. You may have gotten 10 points, but that may be just because you turned it in on time. So make sure that if you received full credit, you go back and still take a look at those comments because there could be some comments on there. Where the comments will be is actually on the document itself in little post-it note looking kind of things. So double check to see where those notes are. All right, going back to the Purdue OWL, why this is such a handy tool and why I keep sending you here is because when you are writing these research essays on your own, if you are continuing on in school, I can probably guarantee you that this will not be the only research essay that you write. It will probably be the first of many. And how do you go about doing it by yourself? I do not, even as a composition instructor, I do not have APA style, MLA style, or any of the above memorized. And so a handbook is a very handy little way for you to check things. And we'll look at a couple of these, but just as review. So these in-text citations, that's what you're working on this week in terms of your content. How do you get research to be intertwined neatly and nicely within your paragraphs? And then you'll see these reference lists, whether it's the basics or whether it's the author part or the periodical. This is where you are going to reference when you get to a source on your own. You go to the appropriate place. If it's a book, you click on that and you follow the directions. You can't always assume that Citation Machine is going to be correct. And so that's why handbooks like this do exist. When you're writing your reference list, if you go back to the basic rules, that's going to tell you that you need page numbers, that you alphabetize by first word, etc., etc. It's going to give you all that information. So definitely before you write your research paper, take a look at reference list basic rules in order to make sure you have those things all correctly done. All right, when I go back to general format, it's going to give you the APA guidelines, and it is specific, and it's probably a little silly, but these rules exist, and instructors, professors, whoever you're going to be writing for in the future, they're very, very picky. And so you have this running head at the top of each page. You have the page header or this running head, and then you also, it mentions page numbers. And then you have title of your paper. And so make sure that you follow those things. This is definitely somewhere where you want to check because it's going to be very helpful to you. It will also talk about some of these other things up here, vidcast or the Purdue OWL YouTube channel. So if you prefer to watch those kind of things, it's there as well. All right, so that's kind of the general format. You have major paper sections. You have the title page. And again, you can notice there's all of these bolded words throughout these paragraphs. That means it's important. So read through this, follow the directions. I know that you're capable of that. So please just take upon yourself to go back and really follow these rules and these directions. It does have a student APA title page listed there for you, so that's what yours should look like when it's finished, including the bolding, including all of that information. You don't have to worry about professional papers. That's not something that you have to worry about. So just look at that first example. In terms of the abstract, this is what it should look like. So read it. Make sure that it looks like that. It should be page 2 of your essay. If you have any issues with Formatting, depending on what you have, Word, Google Docs, etc., you may have to Google, how do I include a running head on using Google Docs, and you'll get some good information there. And we don't need to cite, but I am going to take you to the sample APA essay because this is what yours should look like with some disclaimers. First of all, APA papers are written almost very like a scientific paper. A lot of times you'll have results, you'll have headings and subheadings. You may or may not have those. So that's one disclaimer. They're also lit reviews, and that's not what yours is either. So just kind of, I'll talk about some of those things as we go through the sample essay. The one really nice thing about this is that the green boxes will tell you the formatting guidelines and why they're doing what they're doing. And the blue is going to give you directions. And so use all of those to give you hints. So page numbers, the paper's title should be written here. It's repeated from up above, essentially. And again, it gives you some hints in green. As we continue going, you'll notice we have the abstract. There's no running head if it's a student paper. So if you don't want to include that running head, that's not necessary. It has the abstract. Here's where we begin with the actual paper itself. So we have the title. And again, I misspoke before. If you want to have a running head, you can. Student papers do not need that, which is what yours would be considered. So running head is up to you. It's a new edition in the 7th edition. It does give you some hints for abbreviations, and I know that some people are using those, so it's important that you kind of take a look at those things. You'll notice that there are these citations. There's a couple of different kinds. This would be considered an in-text citation. This is considered a parenthetical citation. Parenthetical citations include the last name of the author and the date, and page number if there is one. In-text citations include that same information, but notice it comes at the beginning rather than at the end of the sentence. You'll also notice that it's in parentheses, hence the name parenthetical documentation. And you'll see those all throughout. So here's another parenthetical, more parenthetical. It's also important for you to understand that every time you cite something new, if it doesn't come from your head, it needs to be cited. So you may have a paragraph where every sentence is cited, even if it's the same source. So keep that in mind. It's going to give you all those hints in here. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong paper. So we're going to stick to this top paper. Again, we see some additional citations. This is important if you find that you have a citation within a citation. So this was one of your quiz questions. If you're reading along in a book by author Blake, so you have this whole book and it's by author Blake, but you see this Einstein quote that you want to use, you have to give credit to both. So Einstein is going to get credit, as is the book that you found it in. And that's kind of the way that works. This is the source that you're going to put on your reference page. And we'll get to that in a second. Sorry, I keep getting into that other paper. So we're going to keep going down. Talks about a lit review, which again, you're not going to have. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the references list, and I want to show you a couple of things. First of all, notice that it's centered and it's bolded. So again, we have sources that have that are organized they're alphabetized by the author, by the first word. So American, and then we get to the other A's. You'll also notice here's an organization, here's a 2 author, there's probably a 1, here's a 1 author. citation or source. So that's all important. The alphabetizing, etc. The inclusion of the web address is also important. And the one thing that should be able to be cross-referenced, and this is important, what is the first part of your reference entry on your references page should also be what corresponds in either the parenthetical or the in-text citation. So when I'm reading along up above in the actual text of the paper, parenthetical documentation or in-text citation would list American Association of University Professors. That's what would be either in parentheses or in the text of the paper with the author or the date, which there isn't one listed here, but that's the information that should be in text or parenthetical. If I go down and I use Armstrong, so I'm reading along in the above in the text of the essay, and I have a quote that I want to use by Armstrong. Armstrong is what goes in the parenthetical or in the in-text citation along with the date, page number, if that's appropriate. And the reason for that is it's like a cross-reference. So I was talking about it as a writer. So I'm writing and I'm inserting these quotes. What goes first is what helps me to figure out what goes into parenthetical or in-text citations. As a reader, if I'm going along and I pick up this paper and I want to double check your fact, and I read along and it's from Armstrong, I very simply have to go to the references list, go to the A's, and cross-reference that. I should find Armstrong in the A's. I find the rest of the information, click on the DOI if I want to, and it takes me right to that source. So it's a means of organization and also cross-referencing. So that's important for you to make sure that you understand. Now before, I believe, maybe they didn't include all of them. I was trying to think of one of the citations that we saw from above, but I can't remember them. So that's basically the ins and outs of the essay. So double check yourself. Also, all of these sources that are listed on this references list have to be cited in your essay. If it's not included in your essay, it doesn't belong on the references list. So again, if it doesn't show up in your essay as a source, if you don't quote it, paraphrase it, or summarize it, it doesn't belong on your references list. So you may have sources that you found that you felt like weren't really all that helpful. They don't belong on your references list. You may have put them in your references list to satisfy a requirement for an assignment, and then you might have trashed that later. Make sure that your references list is updated because I'll cross-reference those. To make sure that anything that's been mentioned in the paper is also on the references list. I'll also look for extras on the references list. So don't put sources in there if you didn't cite them in your essay. All right. Again, we're looking at the student paper. Don't worry about the professional paper because that's not what you're using. Use this site to help you to double check. Go back and look at all the comments that I've put on those references lists in order to help you write and complete that references list as well as the abstract and the title page. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.